My name is Mary Walker. I'm part of the U.S. Department of State, and I am part of this larger whole of government effort to bring more safety, security, and trustworthiness to the American people for AI systems. And so the President Biden, recently announced an executive order on AI and increasing the safety, the security, and trustworthiness of AI. And there are 8 pillars, 8 lines of effort in this executive order that range from promoting innovation to increasing civil liberties and privacy considerations, and increasing capabilities in the government itself, as well as international outreach. And so throughout each of these lines of effort, we're looking to increase trustworthiness, and that ranges from reaching out to educators, to talking to labor unions and workers, to build more digital literacy and explain what artificial intelligence even is and how it can be applied in their streams of work or education, and all the way through looking at government agencies, tasking different government agencies to look at their own systems to see, are they safe, are they secure, and report out on what they have found and try to increase the trustworthiness within their agencies as well as to the public. And then in these various lines of effort, we have multiple stakeholder engagement. So we're talking to academics, we're talking to the private sector, we're talking to other government bodies, and we're having these consultations to learn how we can build the right frameworks and the right standards and guidelines to make sure that every step along the way that we are taking into consideration reduction of risks for citizens, while promoting innovation and protecting democracy and human rights. In terms of international cooperation, we are engaged in bilateral discussions, multilateral fora, including G7, G20, OECD, UNESCO, United Nations, Council of Europe, and we're having bilateral discussions with the European Union. I mean, any government we're having discussions with on this very important issue, and we're having multi-stakeholder engagements as well. So we are deeply engaged internationally as is. And this is a common thread that is woven throughout our lines of effort that I described before. And one of the pillars, one of the lines of effort, is to work towards a global framework on how we can engage our international partners to address AI. And how can we look at standards, how can we look at common principles, and develop the right guidelines on an international scale, and through what mechanisms to be able to expand on the work that we're doing nationally, as well as amplify the codes of conducts and agreements and principles that we've agreed on in international fora as well. So it's really woven throughout our executive order, and it's also has been part of our work for as long as diplomacy has existed. For example, artificial intelligence was part of the agenda on the US-EU Trade and Technology Council before it ever became a household name. So we were looking at AI as this critical and emerging technology from the beginning and bringing it into the international sphere. We have had existing cyber and technology dialogues with numerous countries bilaterally for many, many years, and AI has been on the agenda. Maybe they weren't being recognized because AI wasn't such a global topic, a household name. But now, looking at our existing work streams, we're trying to take that work and amplify it and make sure that we're kind of working together toward a common goal. Bilaterally, we have existing agreements, we have existing work streams from early on in the value chain, from the research and development all the way through scale up and market, and looking at all the different market considerations in terms of trying to reduce barriers to enable more innovation and more market adoption of these types of technologies. So we've been doing that already organically through people-to-people exchanges, business-to-business exchanges, and also at the political level. So there has been existing international cooperation for many years. And more recently, there's been this explosion of international dialogue on artificial intelligence, which we applaud, and we're engaged in all the way from the United Nations to the OECD, various working groups and committees within the OECD. Recently, we just joined UNESCO in July, so we're now working with UNESCO as they move forward in their work on ethical AI. We're engaged in the Global Partnership on AI, GPI. We are very active in the G7 and applaud the G7 for releasing its new code of conduct and the recent leader statement. We're involved in the Council of Europe, and so, and then recently in the UK, we signed on to the Bletchley Declaration on safety, and so anywhere that we can plug in, we plug into. We want to make sure that we are engaged in all fronts, bilaterally, multilaterally, and then we have a number of initiatives working with the private sector, talking to think tanks, with academics, civil society, to understand what they're dealing with and to see how the government can support their work and also put in the guardrails necessary to produce, safe, secure, and trustworthy AI systems. So the main stakeholders in AI systems are researchers, academics, private sector, the government is starting to become a user as well. And I think as we see AI continue to get developed and adopted more, we'll see it kind of proliferated throughout multiple use streams. And we're looking at different steps along the value chain. And so every step of this has to have trustworthiness built in to the early stage planning, to the testing, and the deployment, and the use, and the continuous monitoring and evaluation. And we have to agree on common principles, what we're looking to achieve, protecting human rights, protecting democracy, encouraging safety and security, these types of common principles. And as long as we keep those common principles in mind as we are implementing these testing and monitoring and evaluation systems along the whole value chain, then as a whole we can ensure more trustworthy and safe and secure AI development and deployment within our societies. Talking to each other is essential, and just thinking through the whole value chain is essential. Starting with just the early stage planning and the conception phase, thinking how you're looking at the data that you're going to be taking in to train the models, all the way through the deployment and the evaluation and the monitoring after it's deployed, to the application and the use cases in the end user, we have to be taking into consideration, these common principles and making sure that the stakeholders are bought in and that they are also committed to upholding these principles in their development. Because, as a federal government, we can only do so much. We are not the ones typically behind the computer programming, and so we really rely on our stakeholders to share the same set of principles that the international community does when they're developing and deploying their systems. When we're taking into consideration people's inputs, there's no one way, just like there's no one best system, one best model. It has to be all ways. So yes, sitting around the table, getting together, sharing best practices, sharing case studies, experiences is definitely important. And that's why we are so engaged internationally in all of the dialogues that are happening. And that's why we are here participating, is because we want to be part of the dialogue. We want to learn, we want to listen, we want to share. This is all essential, and not just between governments, but between all of our stakeholders, and having those consultations is critical. And it needs to be done one-on-one, group setting, in almost teaching and webinars and education, training, on-site visits to see how these systems are operating. I think we have to look at this from many different angles so that we can best understand it. And when we understand the viewpoints from our different stakeholders, then we can have a much more productive conversation. We are here, we're in the conversation, and we care deeply about the future of AI, and we want to protect our own people. We want to make sure that what is being developed in the United States and then proliferated around the world is safe for global citizens, and that AI is being used for good, and that AI is being used for the benefit of humanity and for making progress and looking at the hard challenges that exist in our world. And we want to mitigate the risks that it poses. And those risks can come from anywhere. They can come from the United States, of course. They can come from anywhere around the world. And so by staying active in these conversations, we are sharing some of the lessons that we've learned, sharing some of our concerns, and then also sharing a lot of the best practices and opportunities that we've identified and hope that other people can also get excited about. I think from the US side, we understand that we have the US model, and Europe has the European model that is being discussed and developed, and various countries have their own models, and that's very understandable. What we want to work towards is digital solidarity, working together so that we have regulatory interoperability, so that our private sector, whether it's a very small company with just one person, as they scale, or if it's an existing large company and as they continue to grow and offer more products and move globally, they have harmonized markets around the world, that they have a common understanding of regulation, and that we have a shared set of guiding principles and guide rails, so that the companies can focus on what they need to focus on, which is the development and the proliferation of the growth of their companies, and then the governments can ensure that our citizens are protected, and that the services and goods that they're being offered are for the betterment of humanity.